everyone, and welcome to another episode of Club Resort Talks. Today's episode is sponsored by Southern Aluminum. Southern Aluminum is a leading manufacturer of innovative linenless meeting and event furniture. For 45 years, the company has pioneered a wide range of furniture, including meeting and banquet tables, event cocktail tables, mobile nesting buffets, mobile bar and beverage systems, retail-style shelving, and much more. Their suite of linenless solutions can complement any space designed through multifaceted product customization. Learn more at southernaluminum.com. Without further ado, let's get up to our senior editor, Phil Keren. Phil, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you?
Doing well. No complaints. We got a cold day coming tomorrow, and then I think we're in for a unseasonably warm temperatures next week.
I know. How about that? I think we've mentioned it before. We've had a pretty unseasonably warm winter here in the northern part of the country. So I'm not going to complain too much about it. Although I now and then I actually miss the snow a little bit, but not too much.
Well, I miss it at Christmas time. After that,
Yes.
it can be green, but what can you do? Such as global warming or just the climate, this particular year. I'm sure we're gonna get hit with snow. Snow's not gone forever here in Northeast Ohio.
No.
Whether we get any more this year or the coming years, I'm sure we're gonna be hit. So
Right. Right.
let's enjoy it while we can.
Absolutely. I'm not going to quite polish my golf clubs yet. I'm not quite ready to do that here in late February, but pretty soon. We'll
I
keep an eye
am.
on the weather. Yeah.
Heck with it. Let's do it.
Doing it. Yeah.
Rose-colored glasses, they're on.
That's right. Yeah.
What are you seeing in the news, Phil?
Well, we had a lot of, I thought, interesting stories this week. One, as I was just telling you about before we came on, the story about Nick Nurse, who's the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He decided to purchase his childhood country club, the country club that he grew up at, which is in Iowa, Carroll Country Club in Carroll, Iowa. As I understand it, I guess he had last summer he got an email from a resident in Carroll asking for help in keeping the golf course alive, and he decided to purchase it. And he's hired a couple of people. I guess he's known for a long time. A former high school classmate, Michael Prenger, is going to be his general manager at the club, and a gentleman named Greg Seaman is going to be the golf pro there. And I guess Nick Nurse met him while he was coaching in Toronto, coaching the Raptors there. So kind of a cool story. He's as I understand it from reading the story we had on clubandresortbusiness.com this week, the Nurse's family belonged to Carroll Country Club for more than 35 years. And he started his love for golf there. He has great memories of, spending the day there, especially in the summer, play some golf, enjoy a barbecue, go swimming, 4th of July, see the fireworks and everything. He has a lot of good memories there. So when he had heard from this resident that they needed some help, he decided to jump in there, and he's the owner of the club now, and he's planning now to be back at the club more than in previous summers to play golf again. So I thought that was a cool story. Kind of brought back memories of the club I grew up at as well. Have similar memories, and exciting to see that he decided to jump in there with a new business venture.
Yeah, Pranger, I guess, came from the University of Southern California. I think maybe in the athletic department. So he's got experience managing big projects. And he and Nurse both raved about the greens. So those greens must be smooth and fast. I guess there are going to be little cosmetic things here and there need to be changed, addressed in the clubhouse. But seems to be in good hands. And, makes me like the 76ers a little bit more.
Right.
Not much more, but a little bit more. And, as long as the Cavs beat them in the playoffs, absolutely fine.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. And I thought the other cool part was to see that he is, well, I guess in a way kind of connected to his having childhood memories of the club. He's planning to support the junior golf programs there at Carroll Country Club through a foundation he has. So I think he's also interested in having high schools, possibly even colleges, play golf tournaments at the club as well. So a lot of good stuff there going on as far as growing the game too.
Seems like a good guy and an excellent coach. I was surprised that he left Toronto after their championship. I thought he'd be there for years to come, but Philadelphia's reaping the rewards, I suppose.
They are, definitely, indeed. Well, looking at another sport, which we've talked about many times on here, pickleball. There was an interesting story this week talking about the rise in popularity of pickleball, but we see the rise of it, but it also means we're seeing more injuries related to the sport as well. And as I understand it, there was a meeting of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons this past week, um, and at that meeting there was a presentation, an analysis of a large government injury database that found bone fractures related to pickleball had increased by 200% during the last 20 years. Um, uh, it was interesting because I guess, as I understand it, that analysis only looked at that kind of an injury. So the story we had shared this week on Club and Resort Business pointed out the fact that um, the injury rate is probably even more so because it was only looking at this analysis was only looking at a certain type of injury. Certainly, likely we probably also see sprained ankles, knee injuries from pickleball. And it was interesting to read the story too because we've often talked on here, Rob, about how pickleball is sort of an easier sport to pick up than tennis. Um, but there's some good comments here from orthopedic surgeons in the story talking about how, hey, even if pickleball's an easier sport than tennis and some other sports we might try, um, I thought they made good comments about the fact you have to be careful anytime you try a new sport. Um, Especially if you've had any health issues, it's probably a good idea to have your doctor check you out a little bit and make sure everything's all right. And also, as we've learned in playing sports, wear correct shoes, do a proper warm up. All those things will kind of reduce the likelihood of injury. But I thought it was an interesting story. Probably, a little bit of a cautionary tale, not to panic anybody, but just remember, I mean, even in a sport like pickleball, which I know is relatively easy to pick up and to enjoy, but the risk of injury is still there, and you should take some precautions for it.
Well, 200% is an alarming statistic. I'm sure statisticians will tell you, well, 200% increase considering the amount of participation increase over the last 20 years is probably, I mean, tenfold as far as participation numbers go. It's not that alarming, but I mean, still, I mean, a fracture is a fracture is a fracture.
Hmm.
And like you said, it may be easier than tennis, but it still involves running around. A lot of people tripping and falling, breaking an ankle, dislocating something at a hip. So, God bless them. And especially when there was the older people. Now there's younger people.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just as because they're more active and they're more aggressive. As the older people, God only knows what kind of injuries you're having. But it's I've still not played pickleball, but
Me
I'm
either.
sure when
Yeah.
I do, and I'm going to eventually, uh, I'll be coming away with some aches and pains. Hopefully, not a fracture.
As a quick aside, Rob, that reminds me, I spoke to my parents about a week ago, and my dad told me that he had tried out pickleball with a friend, a mutual friend. And he said he enjoyed it a lot. My dad is in his 70s and good health and everything, but he at one time played tennis. It's probably been, good lord, it's probably been 30 years since he played tennis, right? Um, Gave it up. Probably gave it up honestly because indeed it is hard on your body. And he said he enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
It was quick and easy to learn, and yeah, so good stuff with that. One other thing about that study that well, we were speculating about. I think one, you made a good point about the fact that, as we know, there's many more people playing pickleball. So some of that statistic, not that I'm an expert with, but we can see reasonably that part of the reason for that is obviously there's a lot more people playing in the first place. So there are going to be more reports of injuries. The other thing that occurred to me too was in talking about how pickleball's an easier sport to play. I tend to think that it also sort of it may attract some people who haven't played sports much in their lives and haven't gotten used to the idea of. I mean, I think proper footwear is really important in any kind of sport you play. Also, a warm up, stretching, and all that stuff. Which, if you grew up playing sports, you kind of understand that. If you're talking about somebody who is kind of a novice to a sport, but they want to try pickleball, maybe that's part of it too. Just not doing the proper preparation, like our one orthopedic surgeon was pointing out in the story. Just another
Hey,
thought with that.
helpful hint coming from somebody who used to work at Foot Locker in college. Running shoes are great for running and even walking, but not great for lateral movement sports. tennis, volleyball. I didn't like that because they're built up higher and they're meant to go heel to toe, heel to toe. So a lot of people wearing their running shoes to go out there and play. Now they're on a
Mhm.
platform and it's easier to twist and turn and hopefully not break an ankle, but certainly so no running shoes on the pickleball court if you're going to be playing aggressively. If you're just out there dinking and dunking, whatever. But soon as you start getting
Right.
competitive, make sure you're wearing the right shoes, tennis shoes, cross trainers, something that's based with a lower level, closer to
Right.
the
Right.
ground.
Interesting. I didn't know that, but it definitely makes a lot of sense for sure. Yep. So just a couple quick ones. I did notice we had a couple stories this week about clubs that are for sale. One was out in Oklahoma, Quail Ridge Golf Club in Grove, Oklahoma, and they're for sale. It comes after actually they did some property enhancements, um, some remodeling of an event center they have there. So they're looking to sell, and then also heading back east, Pomona Golf Course and Country Club in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey. Actually, that's been on the market since November, um, listing for about 2.5 million. It has a 3,800 square foot clubhouse, restaurant seats, 54, small kitchen, outdoor patio. Um, I believe if I saw it, yes, it is. It's a 9-hole golf course there as well. So, a couple places looking to find a buyer, and hopefully, we'll find a buyer that's interested in maintaining those places as golf facilities.
Yeah. Hey, golf is big right now. The boom is we're on the downside of the boom, but it's still riding a lot higher than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So get in there, get in while the getting's good. And let's keep these golf courses going.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I important to keep the kind of variety of places that we see going as well. I think to appeal to that sort of wide range of interests we're seeing especially among new golfers they're coming into it.
Hey, let's get to our interview guest before we get too deep into our conversations. Can you give us a little tip on what's coming up?
Sure, absolutely. This was interesting. We had featured actually this company's study recently too on clubandresortbusiness.com. It was a study that looked at kind of some metrics, analytics around country clubs. It's a company called Placer.ai. They are a location analytics company that looks at mobile data to create foot traffic estimates for any physical location in the US. I'm going to let our guest explain it further than that. That's my Cliff Note version of that, right? But anyways, the company recently did an examination of 50 country club locations around the country, looked at some visitor information with those clubs. Then they focused in on some demographic information for 12 of those sites. And the most interesting finding was that at least to me, was the median age of people going to the clubs as either member or guest is declining. And by my rough math, of the 12 locations, it had declined actually about 3.5. The median age had gone down about 3.5 years from 2019 to 2023, which I think is interesting because obviously that's like a pre-pandemic versus a post-pandemic comparison. So I talked to his name is RJ Hottovy. He's head of analytical research at Placer.ai. Had an interesting conversation about the data and what it means for club leaders and kind of how they can put it to good use for their future plans.
All right, intriguing, and I'm sure a lot of good nuggets for our audience to take away. So without wasting any more time, let's get to it, Phil.
Welcome back to Club and Resort Talks. I'm Phil Keren with Club and Resort Business. Well, a company called Placer.ai recently examined location intelligence metrics of country clubs in an effort to better understand how these metrics are shifting and what might be driving these changes. One finding of this examination is that the makeup of club membership may be starting to change. Thought it was an interesting topic here for our audience. Joining me to discuss the findings is RJ Hottovy, head of analytical research at Placer.ai. RJ, welcome to Club and Resort Talks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Phil.
Oh, you're welcome. First of all, to start it off, for our audience, can you tell us about Placer.ai and what your company does?
Yeah, thanks. So Placer.ai, we are a location analytics company powered by mobile data. In simpler terms, that means we can come up with foot traffic estimates for any physical property in the United States, whether that's an individual retail store, shopping mall, airport, downtown district, golf course, country club, anything you can draw a shape around on a map, we can come up with a foot traffic number for. And how does that work? Well, we partner with several dozen app companies, and through those app partnerships, we are given 24/7 location data for a panel now of about 25 million different devices. Importantly, we collect no information about that device user. In fact, all we collect is latitude, longitude, and a unique ID that we can assign to that device to track things like visit frequency. But importantly, we know nothing about that user. All the data we collect is anonymized, aggregated. There's no way to tie that back to an individual user. But what's interesting about our data is we also then partner with other data sets. So if we know a device is going back to a certain zip code, and that's about as granular as we get in terms of where, the location, we can infer that's a home location, and we can use other data sets about that zip code block or that area to infer who might be coming into a shopping mall or to a retail store or to a country club. So that's how we're able to still do things like demographic data and psychographic data, even though we aren't collecting any personal information. So we, at this point, work with about 3,600 customers. We work across commercial real estate, retail, restaurants, municipalities, advertising businesses, although we don't do individual targeting. So a lot of different variety in businesses and different things. A lot of different things foot traffic analytics can tell you, and really help add a lot of value, create return on investment type decisions, better real estate decisions, better marketing decisions. So those are the kind of things that we like to help out with our platform.
Okay. And to kind of, I use a term there, and for our audience probably needs a little better clarification on. Can you talk a little bit about the then location intelligence metrics, what those are?
Yeah, I mean, in simplest form, I mean, I think there's a number of things that we track, a number of KPIs that we look at, overall visits to a particular property or to, an area. So the number of visitors, visit frequency, how is that compared to a year ago or to 4 years ago if we're looking at things on a pre-pandemic basis? Visit frequency, how long do people stay at a given property? Dwell time, I think, can be a really meaningful number to look at. Trade area size, how far are people coming in? I mentioned that we use other data sets that, census and other public data sets that we can layer on top of our data. From that data, we can understand, household income or average age of people coming in. So real meaningful insights. A lot of businesses have some of this data, but not completely, especially, maybe you have your member data, but you're looking for guest data, or just want to understand the profile of the trade area that you're in, the market that you're in. A lot of different ways to get answers to maybe fine tune your business and really optimize whatever it is, whatever initiative it is you're working on.
Okay. Actually, what you've said so far actually called to mind another question, since we are talking about an examination of some metrics involving country clubs. Have you, just in general, I'm not asking for any specific, are you working with any country clubs around the country right now who are interested in the data you're generating?
I believe we are working with some groups,
Mhm.
and we've worked with some golf organizations as well. Worked with a couple of trade groups that are, worked with some other leisure groups as well. So it's amazing. We're finding new applications and new use cases for our data every day, and so I think we are starting to use it. But if your listeners are interested, feel free to check out our site at Placer.ai. We've got a free version site that you can check around and get a feel for the data that's out there. And if it's interesting, feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk more.
Okay, very good. So for this examination that I talked about a moment ago, you had looked, Placer AI looked at one of the pieces of information you looked at was you looked at visit rate data at 50 country clubs around the country, and you compared month to month. You compared 2023 to the corresponding months in 2019, and you did find, as we were talking before we came on here, that number was actually in 2023. A visit rate was higher in 8 of the 12 months in 2023 compared with their corresponding months in 2019.
Yep.
Um, Highest level of growth in June of 2023, where the visits were up by almost 29% compared to June of 2019. So,
Yep.
talk about that a little bit. Why did you think that the club visits, for the most part, increased during the 4 year period? Any factors at play that you could point to?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a starting point, you're exactly right. For this analysis, we looked at a custom chain or custom index of 50 different country clubs spread across the country. So we wanted to look at multiple markets, just to kind of make sure we were seeing kind of the impact, and kind of normalizing for regional differences. And you're exactly right. I mean, if we look at 8 of the 12 months in 2023, we saw that visits were up, compared to the same period in 2019. This is important because if you look across the broader retail or restaurant space, that's pretty rare. We're not seeing a lot of categories that are up on a year-over-4-year basis. To be honest, most of the groups are down. Maybe that's because we saw a lot of closures in retail and restaurants because of the pandemic, or just changing in behavior, people moving to different trade areas, things like that. So it's fascinating to us to look at the country club data because this is one of those categories that's seen some real strength. And I think there's a number of factors that explain it. One, I do think that we saw adoption of golf really start to pick up. Golf and other activities that you find at a country club really accelerated during the pandemic. We saw this big pull forward in demand for sporting goods and other athletic equipment, and I think there was a corresponding increase in demand for country clubs as a result. So I think that was a big part of it. I think we're also seeing evidence of a changing behavior around how people interact with country clubs. They're becoming much more than just for sport and becoming much more of a social and networking environment. And I think that's a big part of it too. And as I'm sure we'll get into more, and I think the demographics around this too, we're seeing country clubs reach in a lot of cases, a younger audience. And I think that's important too. So I think there's a number of factors that would explain why we're seeing visitation up year over year, really coming down to just, behavioral things like people adopting the sport more, using country clubs differently than they had in the past, and just, a different makeup of who's coming into these locations.
Interesting point too about golf, and my co-host Rob Thomas and I have spoken at length actually on our podcast about how indeed golf experienced a boom during the pandemic, because indeed it was one of those few activities that people could continue doing during those difficult times we went through the last couple of years. So yeah, that definitely played a big role in it for sure, golf. And then also, yes, we've also talked in general about the changing nature of the country club, the way it's also sort of taking on a little bit more of a community center aspect as well. So yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
a lot of changes there. Sure, go ahead, RJ.
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that's something we're seeing across the board, and it's not just country clubs. I mean, I think there's been a big movement. As we kind of were isolated for a couple of years, we're seeing more and more, community centers, and they can be different things. It could be the shopping mall, it could be a park in your neighborhood, things like that. Every neighborhood seems to be having, kind of this community, this placemaking, as we call it, is really becoming an important part of the overall, evolution of where we see commercial real estate, and really kind of just, neighborhoods and communities in general. So it's fascinating because we're seeing it across other neighborhoods and other areas of the country as well. And it's funny the different properties that are taking on that role as a community center is pretty interesting.
Absolutely. And I just want to dig into that then a little bit more. More specific. I know we talked about the 50 clubs around the country you looked at in terms of visits to the club. Uh, you also looked more specifically at 12 different country clubs, as I understand it, three each in Long Island, New York, Austin, Texas, the greater Atlanta area, and then the greater Minneapolis area, and looked at some demographic information there. I know that then for those clubs, you looked at one of the things that Placer.ai looked at was median age of visitors to the club. And and I saw, oh, actually, one thing I want to get into too is, and sorry, I should have asked that to start with. y- As far as comparing 2019 to 2023, what was the reasoning kind of behind comparing those years, if you will?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Data.
if
Yeah.
nothing else, yeah, no, and the comparison between 23 and 2019, it's really to kind of get a capture of pre versus post pandemic. 2019 was kind of the last normal year before we all sequestered and locked ourselves away for the pandemic. And 2023 was kind of quote unquote the first normal year we've had. It certainly wasn't. It certainly some differences between 2023 and 2019, but effectively that gives us a pre versus post pandemic, the ability to look at things pre versus post pandemic.
Okay, right. I kind of had a sense that's what it was about, but I
Yeah.
figured I'd let you share that, and it makes a lot of sense. Interesting now to look at. It's a good point. 2023 may have been our first quote unquote normal year, whatever that means to everybody anymore.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean, 2020 was, down for just about any kind of property, no matter what
yes.
you were in, and then 21
Mhm.
was kind of a recovery year. 22 had some normalization, but still we had, Omicron early in 22 and, other
That's right.
things. 23 is kind of the first really normal year. And again, use your own definition of normal there. It's kind of the first normal year we've had. So that was appropriate in terms of a comparison here.
Sure, makes a lot of sense. So among those 12 clubs I mentioned, or in those different locations around the country, I know Placer AI you were looking at um, median age among visitors. And I guess for our audience too, we should clarify visitors does refer to, you can correct me, RJ, if I'm getting this wrong. Visitors does refer to both members and guests coming to a club. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
the way to think about it is if you draw a shape around your country club, our data would collect anybody who would be coming in there. Not anybody, again, we only collect a sample devices that are out there, but from that data, that sample we see of people coming into your property, our data scientists use the latest in AI and machine learning to extrapolate that to come up with a full estimate. Our panel accounts for about 25 million devices, which represents about 10% of the device population in the US, give or take. And from there, we can extrapolate. So the way to think about it, though, is, we draw a shape around your club. Anybody
Mhm.
coming in, whether that's a member, whether that's a guest, that would be included in that sample that we then draw from.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and in looking at that data, you did find among the 12 clubs in the different parts of the country, the median age among members, visitors, what have you, had dropped by 3.6 years from 2019 to 2023. Um, can you talk about any thoughts on why that change happened like that?
Yeah, it's been fascinating too, and this is something I think is important for anybody really that deals in physical properties. Is that the trade areas are really changing. I mean, we've seen a lot of different migration trends the last couple of years. We've certainly seen more people move out of urban settings to more suburban and rural, and I think that's part of what's happening here. Is that we saw some younger population, or kind of maybe your 30 to 40-year-old population that had maybe gotten tired of the city, was looking to find more space, had moved out to the suburbs. So I think there's certainly an element of that. We didn't see that among kind of the 20-something audience, but I think we did see a pretty big movement between kind of the ages of 30 and 40 to the suburban and even in a lot of cases rural areas. And so I think that explains a lot of it too, is that the trade areas around, particularly some of these markets, had changed the last couple of years. So I think that migration, just between urban to suburban played a big part of it. We've also seen migration away from certain markets. I mean, we saw a lot of northern markets like New York, Chicago, a lot of western markets like San Francisco and Los Angeles. People from those areas moved to, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Central Florida, and the Carolinas were areas that we saw a lot of growth. And so I think looking at some of the markets that we identified, and as you pointed out, they were Long Island, Minneapolis, Atlanta, and Austin. I mean, I think we saw some of those trends play out there as well. So I think certainly migration played a part in it too. But I also think, what we just talked about, the idea that the way clubs are being used has evolved. And so I think that some of that is also playing into the fact that, it's attracting a younger audience. People want to be part of these social clubs. And to your point about becoming a community center, I think that did have a big part in drawing some of the new people into these locations. And again, the way we're looking at this is based on the sample of people coming in, the location. We can then extrapolate from the zip code and the makeup of that zip code. And we're seeing people from who are younger ages of that zip code are coming into these locations more often.
Okay, very good. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there's definitely been I know my co-host and Rob and I have talked a lot about various things that have happened over the years to or even just recent years to make clubs um more in line and more of interest to a younger audience than perhaps they had done in the past. Whether it's kind of relaxing dress code, it could be being more family friendly because if it's the 30 to 40 crowd that's moving in there, that might be seeing a lot of people starting families, having children, have activities there. Um, so yeah, a lot of things like that I think have definitely played a role in bringing down that. It was interesting to. It did strike me. I mean, I don't do this. RJ, you're the one who looks at the data like this all the time. It did seem to me though that and that, by the way, I think that number I got, the 3.6, I think I did my own little math there, and that was the average among those 12 clubs of the average drop in the median
Sure,
age was
sure.
3.6 years among those 12 clubs. It struck me though, but I guess have you tell me that seemed like a pretty significant drop in a fairly short period of
That
time.
is,
Is
to
that
be
fair to
honest,
say? Yeah.
that is, and I'm going to trust your math here, Phil. So I'll take your word for it. But that is a pretty significant drop. Typically, you don't see that kind of change when we're looking at, say a retail chain or a restaurant change. You don't see that much of a drop. I mean, you see minor differences, and even a minor difference can be meaningful. We've seen a couple retailers that have drawn younger audiences that brought that average or median age down. This is pretty significant. I mean, to see kind of the average age was going into it was kind of like 41, or so, a little over 41 years old was kind of the average, median age of a visitor coming into those clubs we selected. To move pretty significantly down like that, that's a pretty big drop. And I think that says a lot too. And you're right. I mean, in a short amount of time, I mean, that just kind of shows you the impact in consumer behavior and how quickly things change. And again, if you're kind of basing your, whatever project it may be, maybe expansion, maybe looking at different amenities for a club, you have to factor in these things because the area around your clubs has changed significantly, no matter where in the country you're located at this point. And so I think that this is kind of interesting that it really kind of underscores how quickly things change in the pandemic and how things are very different from where they were. And I think that's obvious to everybody, but seeing the data behind it's really interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely interesting to see it kind of bear out in the data. Um, so one other category that this examination looked at, you looked at the median household income among the visitors and members that coming into the club. Um, in this case, of the 12 clubs we've been referring to, 6 of those clubs saw a rise in the median household income among visitors, and 6 saw a drop in the category. Any thoughts on why the results, I guess, were a little more varied than it was on the median age issue?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the migration data that I referenced before. The fact that a lot of these places have seen just a change in their overall demographics and stuff. For instance, in Austin, Texas, where we did see almost, I think the 3 clubs we looked at actually saw a decrease, or one was flat, and then 2 of the clubs were actually saw a decrease in household income. What's interesting about that is, I mean, we've seen a ton of population growth to Austin. I mean, that was one of the top 5 cities in terms of permanent population growth that we saw during the pandemic. So from 2019 to today. But what's interesting too is if we take a look at kind of the household income and where people were coming from before, and then that settled in the Austin market, we actually saw a decrease in the overall household income. So that lower household income individuals were coming into that market, at certainly lower than what was already there before. And so I think that played a part in that number. On the flip side, something like in Minneapolis, where we actually saw most of the clubs in that market we surveyed saw an increase in household income. In a lot of cases, that was that urban to suburban movement that we saw. Higher household income individuals that were living downtown maybe moved out to the suburbs. So I think it's case by case, but it usually comes down to movement of people and migration is really the explanation behind it all. It's been fascinating. I mean, we've seen all sorts of trends, and honestly, we've been talking to a lot of retailers, a lot of movie theater companies, a lot of other commercial businesses about how their trade areas change because hey, we expect a lot more growth because we're seeing this big population boom. But have you looked at who those people are? It's not just the absolute number of people coming in; it's the profile of that customer coming in that you really have to be mindful of. And so I think that's going to be interesting. Things may have changed in a given market. There may be because of this migration, because of the housing market and other things going on, that audience that you're trying to target for your clubs has dramatically changed. So I think you're right. It is a mixed result. It's not quite the same thing that we saw with the demographics. And I think to your point, some of that was also the way clubs are being used. But I think it's interesting too, just the areas around each one of these clubs has changed. And I think that's explaining some of the household income changes that we're seeing.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So in our audience here, Club Resort Talks, Club Resort Business, clubresortbusiness.com is, we mainly have general managers of country clubs. We have head golf professionals, golf course superintendents, other professionals in the club industry. So you've really already been touching on that a little bit, but maybe to kind of synthesize it here, what aspects of this study should they pay the most close attention to here?
I mean, I think the key takeaways, one is that there are pretty clear signs that demand for country clubs is up. And that's either because people are playing golf more or some of the other activities that are affiliated with country clubs, or that people are using clubs differently. But I think it's pretty clear with the data that visits to country clubs are up. They're attracting more people. The usage rates of country clubs are up. So I think that's first the positive. The second point is certainly the age of people coming into country clubs has gone down. And I think that is important as you kind of plan out and think about, what it is you want to use, how the club wants to be used. Is it something of a community center? Does that help in terms of new projects? And then lastly, I mean, household income. I mean, that is something we're seeing a wide range of variety in terms of, what's happening in different trade areas. And so as you think about different things and how you want to optimize your club in the future, it's something that I think you have to be mindful of. It's not just the number of people there, but also the characteristics and the profile of that customer, because there could be significant opportunities to grow your membership base and make the club maximize the opportunities for that club. So a lot of different things, and I mean there's so much more too in terms of geolocation, location-based analytics too. I mean that you can really dive into cross visitation. What other businesses are these companies, are these visitors looking at? Market share, we doing better than rival clubs, things like that. A lot of different things you can dive into, but it's really interesting. Just kind of, we're even scratching the surface with just the visitation changes year over 4 years and the demographic data. It's really interesting to look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it does, I can see where it presents a lot of opportunities for club professionals to um, plan new projects, but of course they might have to shift their focus on what they're, directing their resources into based on what they're finding out, because again, usage going up, but the profile of the typical person coming in the club might be different than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So now
Right.
you need to look at how to adjust what you're offering as far as programs and facilities and services. So yeah,
I
it'll
mean,
be interesting.
we can even get as granular as things like different activities and sports. I mean, is this particular market, have a lot of paddleball enthusiasts or things like that? We can get pretty
Mhm.
granular with the data. So yeah, it's worth checking out if you haven't. So, but really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. And if RJ, if people want to read more about any of these, I mean, I'm going to mention Club and Resort Business, of course, but where can people find out more about the research that Placer AI is doing?
Yeah, just go to Placer.ai. There is a free trial subscription there as well, but there's a couple other publications. We have the Placer blog that covers things kind of more day-to-day type stuff. There's also something called the Anchor, which my team does, which is a little bit more commercial real estate and retail focused. But go check it out, explore it, and see it. There's a lot of good stuff, a lot of interesting sound bites, and just kind of gives you a sense for how you can use location analytics to analyze different trends, for different, different things. And, maybe it's your other businesses, other things that you're involved with. There's probably some useful data out there. So check it out. If you want to talk more, if you see some stuff you like and want to talk more, we're always happy to talk.
Excellent. Sounds great. Well, very interesting stuff. RJ Hottovy with Placer AI. Thank you for your time, RJ. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for folks watching this podcast today, just a reminder, you can watch other episodes of Club and Resort Talks just by visiting us at clubandresortbusiness.com. You can also look at our YouTube channel, check that out. And of course, check out clubandresortbusiness.com for all the latest news in the club and resort industry. Until then, take care, stay well, and have a great day.